Hello again, my loves. Tonight's story follows Noor, a manuscript conservator working out of Miami, and Camila, the daughter of a shipping dynasty everyone whispers about, but no one investigates, who stood up at her sister's wedding and told 300 guests exactly who I was going home with. What starts as outrage and inconvenient attraction becomes a slow, stubborn kind of love, the kind that has to be chosen twice before it's allowed to be real. Part 1. The wedding. The first mistake was letting my landlord's cousin talk me into a +1. The second was wearing the green dress instead of the black one, because green photographed better, and I had, apparently, some vanity left after 11 months of squinting at foxed 18th century paper under a loupe. The third mistake, and the one I would spend the rest of the summer failing to regret, was the mojito. I don't even like mint. Renata's wedding occupied the entire lawn of a Coral Gables estate that had been, until recently, a private botanical garden, which meant the Duarte family had simply purchased a small ecosystem for the weekend and hung string lights through it. There were 200 and some guests, 4 bars, a swing band, and enough orchids flown in from Oaxaca to make a florist weep with professional jealousy. I knew none of this until I arrived, because my landlord's cousin, a paralegal named Deb who worked, distantly, for a firm that handled the Duarte shipping contracts, had described the event as a wedding, casual-ish. Casual-ish, in this case, meant a live macaw on a perch near the dessert table and security men in linen blazers who managed to look elegant while clearly being armed. "You're doing the face again," Deb said, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne she'd lifted off a passing tray. "I don't have a face. You have several faces. This one says I have made a terrible mistake and I am doing math about the exits." She wasn't wrong. I did the math. 4 exits, one of them a dock leading to a private stretch of Biscayne Bay, where 3 boats were tied up like they were part of the centerpiece budget. I took the champagne instead of leaving, because leaving required walking past the receiving line, and the receiving line was where the family stood. I'd spent enough of my professional life around wealth to have theories about it. Old money wore its jewelry like it was tired of it. New money wore its jewelry like a dare. The Duartes wore theirs like punctuation, precise, minimal, placed exactly where it would be noticed and nowhere else. Rafael Duarte, the father, stood at the head of the line in a charcoal suit with no tie, shaking hands with the economy of a man who had made peace with being important. Beside him, his elder daughter Renata glowed in white lace, radiant in the specific, slightly glassy way of brides who have been awake since 5 a.m. having their hair curled. And beside Renata, in a suit the color of wet slate, stood the sister everyone in the industry gossip circuit called the Quiet One, which I would come to learn was one of the least accurate nicknames ever applied to a human being. Camila Duarte did not look like she was standing in a receiving line. She looked like she was auditing one. "That's her," Deb said, unnecessarily, following my gaze. "Camila. She runs the logistics side. Ports, mostly. Don't stare." "I'm not staring. You're doing the other face now. The appraisal one." I probably was. It's an occupational hazard. Years of assessing damage, dating pigments, deciding what's original and what's later intervention will do that to a person's eyes. Camila Duarte had a face built for close reading, a straight nose that had clearly been broken once and reset with someone's careful attention, a mouth that stayed level even while people around her performed delight at her, dark hair pulled back hard enough to look like a decision rather than a style. She wore no necklace, a single ring, heavy, on her right hand. She was not smiling. Everyone around her was smiling at her, the specific overbright smile people give to power they haven't yet decided whether to fear. I looked away before she caught me. I was successful for approximately 40 minutes. Somewhere around cocktail hour, a server pressed a mojito into my hand that I hadn't ordered, and I made the mistake of drinking it while standing too close to the dock, admiring, with real, unfeigned interest, a stone birdbath that someone had clearly imported and clearly overcleaned, the surface scrubbed of a patina that had taken decades to earn. "You're frowning at my mother's birdbath," a voice said. I turned. Camila Duarte stood close enough that I had to look up slightly, which I resented on principle. It's been over-restored, I said, before manners could intervene. Somebody stripped 50 years off it with a pressure washer. It's a shame. One dark eyebrow rose. You have opinions about garden furniture. I have opinions about the destruction of history in general. Garden furniture is just today's example. And what do you do when you're not mourning bird baths? I'm a conservator. Manuscripts, mostly. Paper, ink, bindings. I stabilize things so they survive being read by people who don't deserve them. That's a very specific kind of contempt. It's earned. You'd be amazed how many collectors think preservation means lamination. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, more like a structural test of one. I was told you restore paintings. You were told wrong. Someone's been discussing me. Deb mentioned you. She said you'd hate this party and be right to. Deb is a menace, and I love her. I looked down at the mojito, which I hadn't asked for, and had somehow already drunk half of. Did you send this? I noticed you didn't like the champagne. You kept holding it without drinking it. I don't like being watched drinking things I haven't chosen. Then I apologize for the mint, Camila said, entirely without apology in her voice. It seemed safer than gin, for a stranger. You don't know that I don't like gin. I know you touched your collarbone when the champagne arrived. That's a woman deciding whether to be polite. Gin would have required a decision I hadn't earned yet. I stared at her. That's an unsettling amount of observation for cocktail hour. I find weddings unbearable. Watching people is the only interesting part. Her eyes, dark and very steady, held mine. Tell me about the bird bath, properly, this time. So I did. I told her about patina, about the ethics of cleaning versus stripping, about a 19th century diary I'd once spent 4 months stabilizing page by page because a previous restorer had ironed the pages flat and destroyed the ink in the process. Camila listened the way almost no one listens to me at parties, not waiting for a gap to redirect the conversation toward herself, but actually following the argument, asking the kind of question that requires you to have understood what was said. So preservation, she said, isn't about stopping time, it's about choosing which damage to keep. Yes, that's exactly it. Most people think restoration means erasing what happened. It doesn't. It means deciding what the object is allowed to remember. I like that, she said, quietly, like she meant it more than the sentence should have allowed. Very few things are allowed to remember what happened to them, in my experience. Something in the way she said it made me want to ask 100 questions I had no right to ask a stranger in a receiving line's shadow. I didn't. Instead, I made her laugh, sudden, low, surprised out of her, with a story about a bishop who'd once demanded I soften a saint's expression because it looked too skeptical of the church. By the time the band struck up something with brass in it, I had been talking to Camila Duarte for 40 minutes, had finished a second mojito I also hadn't ordered, and had entirely forgotten that I had come to this wedding as Deb's +1, and not as anyone's date. You're very funny, Camila said. For someone who spends her life alone in a room with dead paper. The paper's not dead. It's just quiet. Is that what you tell yourself? It's what I tell people who ask rude questions at weddings. That got the smile. The real one, sudden, unguarded, that changed her whole face from something carved to something lit from inside. I felt it land somewhere under my ribs, unhelpfully. A bell rang near the dais. Renata's father was tapping a glass. The toasts were beginning. You're required, I said. So it seems. Camila's eyes didn't move from mine. Don't leave. It wasn't phrased as a request. It didn't need to be. I should have left then. I had gathered more than enough material to torment Deb about for months, and every rational part of me, the part that paid rent, that had a 6-month contract at the Betancourt Library ending in 11 weeks, that had left exactly this kind of complication behind in 3 different cities already, was doing careful math about the dock and the boats, and the very reasonable Uber I could call in 90 seconds. Instead, I stayed by the bird bath and watched Camila climb the low dais beside her father. Rafael Duarte spoke first, warm, practiced, the kind of toast fathers give when they've given 100 speeches about legacy and family and know exactly which words land. Applause arrived on cue. Then he turned, offering the microphone to his younger daughter, with the air of a man performing generosity he didn't quite feel. Camila took it. "My father talks about legacy," she said, and the lawn quieted in the particular way crowds quiet when they sense something is about to happen that wasn't in the program. "About choosing who we build with. I agree that choosing matters." Her eyes found mine across 200 people and did not move again. "There's one thing I want, today, that isn't on any seating chart." Deb, somewhere behind me, made a small strangled noise. "Noor Calloway," Camila said, my full name, in her mouth, in front of a stone birdbath and a live macaw, and a man in a linen blazer who was, I now noticed, watching me with sudden professional interest. "Is coming home with me tonight. I wanted everyone here to hear me say so, instead of finding out tomorrow." The lawn did not gasp, exactly. It did something quieter and more dangerous, a held breath distributed across 200 throats. Rafael Duarte's jaw tightened, by a degree that would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't spent a career reading fine cracks in old surfaces. Renata, radiant in white, looked delighted, which told me something about the sisters that I filed away for later. I did not move. Heat climbed my throat. Every part of me that despised being announced like an acquisition stood up, furious. Every part of me that had spent 40 minutes wanting exactly this woman's undivided attention discovered, in real time, what it felt like to receive all of it at once, publicly, without my consent. Camila stepped down from the dais. People made room. She crossed the lawn toward me, with the calm of someone who had already decided the outcome and was simply walking to collect it. "Was that necessary?" I asked, when she was close enough that no one else could hear. "No." "Good. I'd hate to think you understood etiquette and chose that anyway." I understood it perfectly. A faint, unrepentant curve at her mouth. "Do you want to leave?" "Yes." The answer came fast. It was also true. It was also, infuriatingly, not the whole truth. "Then I'll walk you to your car," Camila said. "Not mine. Yours. You don't have to take anything from me tonight that you didn't choose." That, more than the declaration, was the thing that undid me a little. Deb drove. I sat in the passenger seat of her ancient Civic replaying the last hour like a woman checking a lock she already knew was secure. "So," Deb said, merging onto Lejeune with the confidence of someone who had definitely had 2 mojitos herself. "You got claimed by a Duarte tonight." "I did not get claimed. I got publicly volunteered." "Same thing, with better shoes." "Deb, I'm just saying, people don't survive doing that to Rafael Duarte's receiving line by accident. That man's family runs half the cargo coming through this port, and everyone pretends not to know what the other half is. Camila just told a room full of investors and cousins and, I'm pretty sure that man in the blazer was a state senator, that she's choosing her own life over whatever alliance her father had planned. That's not a crush. That's an act of war with excellent lighting." I looked out the window at the city sliding by, palm trees strobing under streetlights, and said nothing, because I didn't trust what would come out if I opened my mouth. My phone buzzed against my thigh. Unknown number. "I know that was unfair to you. I'm not sorry I noticed you. I am sorry I didn't ask first." I said refreshing. I stared at it until the light changed. "Well," Deb said, "she's apologizing by text." Efficient. I typed and deleted 4 replies. Sent the 5th. "You don't get to apologize and mean it in the same message. Pick one." The response came almost instantly. "Then I withdraw the apology. I meant every part of it." I put the phone face down on my knee and did not look at it again until I was home, alone, in an apartment decorated by someone, myself, 3 years ago, in a hurry, who had clearly believed beige represented emotional stability. I stood in the dark kitchen with the tap running and thought about the way she'd said "you don't have to take anything from me tonight that you didn't choose," and hated how much that single sentence was doing to undo the anger I was trying to hold on to. Part 2. The library. After hours. I did not answer for 4 days. I told myself this was dignity. It was, more accurately, a controlled experiment in whether I could out-stubborn a woman who ran a shipping empire's logistics division and therefore had, presumably, considerable patience for long negotiations. She did not call again. On the second day, a message. A 1523 book of hours came up. At a private sale last week. The bindings split at the spine. I thought of you. No pressure to respond. I just wanted you to know, I noticed the kind of thing you'd notice. Attached was a photograph, professionally lit, of exactly the kind of catastrophic, gorgeous, heartbreaking damage that made my chest ache on sight. A 16th century leather binding cracked clean through, vellum leaves visibly cockled from centuries of humidity, gold tooling worn to ghost lines along the edges. I did not respond. I looked at the photo for 11 minutes, which I timed, out of some grim commitment to self-honesty. On the fourth day, my supervisor at the Betancourt Library, a soft-spoken man named Elias, who had never once in 11 months asked me a personal question, appeared at my workbench and said, with visible discomfort, "There's a request. Private collector wants a consult on a manuscript, after hours, tomorrow evening. They asked for you specifically." "Which collector?" "The Duarte Foundation." I set down my scalpel very carefully, the way you set down anything you don't trust your hands with. "Tell them I'm booked." I did. "They said they'd wait until you weren't." Elias hesitated. "Noor, whatever this is, the foundation funds 40% of our acquisitions budget. I'm not telling you to go. I'm telling you that saying no costs something, and I'd rather you know that than not." I hated that he was right to say it. I hated more that some ungovernable part of me had already decided to go before he finished the sentence. The library after hours became a different building, all climate control hum and pooled light over glass cases. The public galleries emptied of the tourists who came to gawk at a first edition Audubon and left without reading a single caption. I waited in the manuscript reading room in dark jeans and a sweater, hair pinned badly, deliberately unimpressive. Camila arrived at 7 exactly, no entourage, carrying 2 paper cups. "Coffee," she said. "Black, 1 sugar." "I asked the barista at the place near your building what you order." "That's invasive." "It's thorough. Those aren't synonyms. In my family they're closer than you'd think." She set the cup down without pushing it toward me, leaving the choice visibly mine. "I brought the book of hours. It's real. I didn't invent a manuscript to get you into a room." She had. It sat on the reading table under proper museum lighting, exactly as damaged and exactly as beautiful as the photograph. Worse in person, the way real damage always is, more specific, more its own particular history of neglect and love and neglect again. I put on gloves without being asked twice. For an hour, I forgot to be angry. The spine had split along the original sewing structure, not from later abuse, but from centuries of honest use. A book that had been read, not merely owned. Camila asked precise questions. What could be saved? What couldn't? Why some restorers would rebind it entirely, and why that would be a kind of vandalism dressed up as care. "You could fix this," she said finally. "Make it look untouched." I could. I won't. The break is part of what the book is now. You don't erase 400 years of a life. You stabilize it, so it can keep having one. She looked at me instead of the manuscript. "You keep saying things that aren't really about paper. Occupational hazard. Is that what this is? An occupational hazard?" I peeled off 1 glove, buying myself a second I didn't need. "You closed a public reading room to ask me about a damaged binding. I asked the library to remain open for 1 consultation. It was their decision to close it to everyone else. Your foundation funds 40% of their budget. They're very independent while agreeing with me constantly." A ghost of the smile again. "Are you still angry?" "Yes." "Good. You should be. I'd distrust you less if you weren't." I laughed before I could stop myself. Short, unwilling, real. "You have a genuinely alarming way of disarming an argument. I'd rather disarm one than win it." She was quiet a moment, turning her coffee cup slowly on the table. "I was supposed to announce an engagement at Renata's wedding. Not mine. A family alliance, brokered through my sister's marriage, that would have used the reception to signal the next arrangement was already underway. My father intended to introduce the Salinas family formally that night. Names, expectations, the beginning of a negotiation dressed up as small talk. And you decided declaring ownership of a stranger was the more sensible alternative." I decided I wouldn't let my silence be used as consent to something I never agreed to. Her jaw tightened, the first crack I'd seen in her composure since the wedding. I didn't choose you at random. I know that doesn't make what I did fair to you. I know you barely know me. But I've spent my whole adult life in rooms where people look at me and see a port contract, a merger, a name on a shipping manifest. You looked at a birdbath and got angry on its behalf. I hadn't seen anyone do that. Care about the wrong thing, the true thing, instead of the thing that was profitable, in longer than I can remember. The honesty landed harder than the public claim had. That had been heat and outrage. This was quieter, and it found the places in me that usually knew better than to listen. That's not permission, I said, to use me as a sentence in an argument I never agreed to be part of. No, it isn't. She met my eyes without flinching from the accusation. I'm not asking you to forgive the wedding. I'm asking you to let me try to earn something after it. I should have said no, I said. Instead, you still owe me an actual apology, not a strategic one. I'm sorry, Camila said, and for the first time all evening, the practiced steadiness left her voice entirely. I used your name to win an argument with my father, and I didn't ask you first, and it was a selfish, careless thing to do to someone who'd been kind to me for 40 minutes at a party. I am sorry. The quiet in the reading room afterward had weight to it. Okay, I said finally. Okay? Okay, I'll have coffee with you again. Somewhere with no manuscripts and no cameras and no dais. The smile that broke across her face then had nothing careful in it at all. Part 3. What the Rain Knew. The weeks that followed did not feel like escape, though I would later understand they'd been building toward exactly the opposite of escape. We ate stone crab at a counter, with 9 seats near the Miami River, because I insisted she experience a meal without a reservation attached to it. Camila ordered for both of us after I'd taken 11 minutes to decide, which should have annoyed me, and instead made me laugh so hard the man next to us glanced over in alarm. You're very bossy for someone who claims to respect autonomy, I told her. I respect autonomy. I also respect efficiency. You were going to order the same thing I ordered anyway. You don't know that. I know you touch your left earring when you're stalling on a decision you've already made. That is an unreasonable amount of information for you to have collected about my earlobes. I collect information. It's the family business. She said it lightly, but something moved behind her eyes when she did. A flicker I was starting to learn meant she'd said more truth than she'd intended. She told me, eventually, about growing up the second daughter in a family that ran ports and shipping lanes across 3 countries, and quietly, unofficially, considerably more than that. About being sent to a boarding school in Geneva at 14 so her father could refine her into someone useful for negotiations. About coming home at 22 and restructuring the logistics division so thoroughly that men twice her age started requesting meetings through her office instead of her father's. Did you enjoy that? I asked. Being feared? She considered the question longer than I expected. I enjoyed being competent at something no one had handed me. The fear was a byproduct I learned to tolerate. What did you want to do before they decided what you were for? Something closed briefly behind her face, then opened again, deliberately, like she was choosing to let me see it. Marine architecture, port design, the actual engineering of how cargo moves, how cities grow around water. I applied to a program in Rotterdam when I was 19. My father found the acceptance letter before I could tell him. What happened? He sent me to Geneva instead, called it broadening me. Did it broaden you? It taught me that a cage can have an excellent view. She said it without self-pity, which somehow made it land harder than if she had. I reached across the counter and put my hand near hers, not touching, an offer rather than a claim. After a moment, she turned her palm up and laced her fingers through mine. Careful, almost testing, like the permission might expire if she moved too fast. The woman who had rearranged a shipping conglomerate's executive structure by 25 held my hand like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. The dinner at the Duarte estate came 2 weeks later, and I understood, walking through gates that opened without visible hands, that I had crossed some threshold I couldn't fully see the edges of. The house sat behind stone walls on a spit of land in Coconut Grove, glass and pale wood built around a courtyard. cameras integrated discreetly enough into the architecture that their discretion felt, somehow, like its own kind of statement. Rafael Duarte sat at the head of a table, long enough to require raised voices at either end. His sister, Camila's Aunt Isabel, wore pearls the size of grapes and a smile capable of removing fingerprints. A lawyer, 2 cousins, and a man named Tomas Salinas, whose family, I would learn within the first course, controlled significant port infrastructure in 3 countries, completed the arrangement. No one mentioned an engagement. Powerful families display knives by leaving them on the table and calling them cutlery. "Ms. Calloway," Raphael said, midway through the fish course, in accented but excellent English, "Miami has treated you well?" "Miami's treated me accurately. It gives back roughly what you bring to it." His eyes sharpened with something that might, in a less controlled man, have been surprise. "And what have you brought to it?" "Professional focus, mostly." "Mostly." Camila's hand found her water glass. "Father." One word. Perfectly level. I watched the negotiation pass silently between them. Old authority measuring new authority, neither willing to name the contest, because naming it would mean admitting uncertainty existed at all. Tomas Salinas asked, with the studied casualness of a man executing a prepared line, whether my contract at the Betancourt ended soon. 6 weeks, I said. It was true, I hadn't discussed it with Camila, because discussing my departure made everything between us sound temporary, and temporary was the register I'd conducted most of my adult relationships in, right up until the moment they stopped being convenient to leave. "How fortunate," Tomas said. "Some temperaments do better with movement." "Which temperaments?" "Independent ones." Camila's fork paused above her plate. Under the table, her knee found mine. Deliberate. Not accidental. And it stayed. "Independence survives most climates," I said. "It's dependence that gets seasonal." Isabel laughed, soft and genuine, the first unguarded sound anyone besides Camila had made all evening. Raphael's expression didn't move, which told me more than movement would have. After dessert, Raphael asked Camila to join him in the study. Asked was a ceremonial verb. Everyone at the table understood it as a summons. She rose, and before she left, looked at me a fraction of a second too long, like she was leaving instructions she didn't have time to say aloud. She returned 20 minutes later. Nothing about her posture had changed. Everything about her control had cost more. "We're leaving," she said. In the car, I asked what her father had said. "Nothing directly." "Then what did he imply?" "With enough elegance that it's worse than a threat." Her jaw tightened. "The Betancourt's acquisitions endowment is partially funded through a trust the family controls." Cold moved through me. Would he interfere with my contract? No. You answered too fast. He won't interfere, because I made the cost of interfering clear to him tonight. There it was, the actual shape of this family's violence. Not threats, grant committees, shipping schedules. The quiet narrowing of someone's professional future, applied with excellent posture and better tailoring. "What did that cost you?" I asked. "Nothing I can't manage." "That isn't an answer either." She looked at me, something raw flashing under the calm. "Why do you keep asking for answers that don't concern you?" "Because you keep deciding, without asking me, what concerns me." The words landed. She looked away first. Her house occupied a low, severe compound in the Grove, all pale wood and dark concrete, organized around a garden, the opposite of spectacle. Architectural models lined a long table by the windows. White card, fine wire, staircases no larger than my palm. A half-finished model of a marina complex with a tree growing straight up through the center of the design. "You still do this," I said. "Sometimes." She didn't look at me. "It's not useful. It's just mine." "It's good. You sound surprised I said that." "I'm protecting your humility. Another of your professional services." She almost smiled. "I charge separately." Thunder rolled somewhere over the bay. The specific violent generosity of a Florida summer storm, arriving all at once. A light in the garden flickered and died. "The circuit trips in heavy rain," Camila said, frowning toward the dark. "You own half the port infrastructure on this coast, and your own garden light gives out. Power is often local." She opened the glass door before I could stop her, rain immediately soaking the threshold. "What are you doing?" "Checking the drainage channel. It backs up in storms like this." She was already crouching by a low stone basin, pulling wet leaves free with her bare hands, entirely unbothered by the fact that she was ruining a silk shirt. I stood in the doorway for exactly 4 seconds before deciding that watching a woman who ran a shipping empire kneel in a flooding garden clearing a drain by hand was not a sight I was willing to observe from a dry distance. I stepped out into the rain after her. It hit like a wall. Warm, relentless, the kind of Miami downpour that turns a street into a river inside 90 seconds. Camila looked up, hair plastered to her cheek. "You're soaked," she said. "So are you. You chose to follow me." There it is again. What choice? Neither of us moved toward the house. The garden had become a world without witnesses. No dais, no receiving line, no lawyer or Selena's son watching for the next negotiable weakness. Just rain hammering the banana leaves, and the two of us standing inside the consequence of every decision made since a birdbath at a wedding. "Why me?" I asked, finally, the question I'd been circling since the reading room. Her eyes moved away, toward the overflowing basin, like the answer was easier to give to water than to me. For 40 minutes at my sister's wedding, I watched people talk to me, congratulate me, offer investments dressed as gifts, introduce daughters they wanted me to remember. Every conversation was a transaction wearing a toast. Rain ran down her face. She didn't wipe it away. "Then I saw you at that bird bath, furious on behalf of Stone. You weren't performing anything. You looked at me the way you looked at the damage on that manuscript, like the true shape of a thing mattered more than what it was worth." My throat tightened. "I saw a very stubborn woman with strong opinions about garden furniture," she said. "I know that shouldn't be enough to build anything on. It was enough to tell the truth about, in front of everyone who's spent my whole life telling me the truth was a liability." "The mojitos made this easier," I said, unsteadily. "And now? Now nothing's easy." "Good," Camila said, and closed the distance. I caught the front of her soaked shirt and pulled her the rest of the way. The kiss was not elegant. Rain made everything slide. My heel skidded on wet stone. Her hand closed hard around my waist to hold me up. She tasted like salt and coffee, and the particular bitterness of a woman who rarely let herself want something out loud. I felt the exact moment she stopped managing the encounter, and simply entered it. Her back met the garden wall. My hands found her jaw, her soaked hair. When my thumb brushed the faint scar along her hairline, a mark she'd once mentioned, briefly, from a car accident at 16, that she clearly didn't want examined further, she went still. "Is this all right?" I asked. "Yes." The word broke slightly on its way out. We reached the house without either of us remembering the decision to move. Later, I would remember it in fragments, the dry warmth of the house after the storm, her wet clothes falling beside mine on the pale wood floor, the way she asked before every new step, until I finally told her that this much courtesy was starting to feel like an insult, and she laughed, low and astonished, against my throat. I would remember discovering that a woman who controlled a shipping empire down to the hour could also be patient in a way that had nothing to do with control at all, that her stillness, up close, was not distance. It was attention. Afterward, storm still rolling outside the windows, I lay with my head on her shoulder, her fingers moving slowly through my damp hair. "This isn't belonging," I said into the dark. "No," she agreed. "This is staying, tonight." "You agree too easily." "I'm learning." "That's unsettling." Her voice, when it came, held something I hadn't heard from her before. Open, unguarded, entirely without strategy. "Sleep, Noor. I don't take orders." "Then stay awake beside me instead." I slept. Part 4. The Alliance. For 9 days, happiness arrived in forms I didn't fully trust. The way you don't trust weather that's been too good for too long in a hurricane state. Camila met me for coffee at 6, because she was already awake and I had barely gone to bed. We ate gas station Cuban sandwiches on a bench by the river, because I insisted she experience food without a reservation attached. Again, on principle. She sent me photographs of port cranes at sunrise, with captions like this one, "Has good bones," that made no sense to anyone but us. Nothing closed for us. No one bowed. It felt, dangerously, like an ordinary life. The rupture arrived by way of a business trade publication, forwarded to me by Elias with the subject line, "Did you know about this?" Duarte Logistics. Succession concerns mount amid reports of stalled Salinas merger. A photograph of the wedding. Camila on the dais, and, half visible near the birdbath, me, drink in hand, face turned toward her, like a confession I'd never approved for print. The article discussed, at length, a partnership between the Duarte and Salinas shipping interests that had been under negotiation for 18 months before personal complications had reportedly stalled it. I called Camila. She answered on the second ring. 18 months, I said, without preamble. A pause, longer than it should have been. Where are you? You tell me. Better question. How long have you known the Salinas merger was still active while you were telling me your father's plans were finished? It's not, Noor. It's more complicated than a headline. Then uncomplicate it for me. Right now. Her office, when I arrived, occupied the top floor of a building overlooking the port itself. Dark wood, gray stone, a wall of windows facing the cranes she photographed like they were art. She stood behind a desk, cleared of everything except a closed folder. You should have told me, I said. Yes. That's it? Yes? There isn't a version of the explanation that makes it better. The merger negotiations didn't end at the wedding. My father used the reception to try forcing my hand publicly. I used it to refuse him publicly. Neither of those things ended the negotiation. It's still active because dismantling an 18-month agreement across 4 jurisdictions doesn't happen because I want it to. You let me believe it was finished. I let you believe I was handling it. That word. My voice cracked on it. You don't get to fold my life into something you handle. You didn't ask me. You never ask me. You just decide what I'm capable of absorbing and manage the rest without telling me. I was trying to protect. I don't need protecting. I need to be trusted with the truth, even the parts that are inconvenient for you. I stepped closer, furious and unraveling in equal measure. You think if you carry every thread alone before it reaches me, no one gets hurt. You think that's love. It isn't. It's just another kind of cage with a better view. Her face closed, the way it had at the wedding just before the claim, the assembling of control in real time. I am not one of your manuscripts, Noor. No. Manuscripts don't insist they're fine, while the binding's splitting down the spine. Don't diagnose me because I didn't ask for your help. And don't call secrecy protection when what you actually mean is that you're afraid trusting me will create an obligation you can't control the shape of. Everything creates obligation. Only if you think love is a contract instead of a choice. The word love landed in the room before either of us was ready for it. We stared at each other across the desk. Camila spoke first, very quietly. Is that what this is? I could have answered honestly. I could have crossed the distance and told her the truth without armor. Instead, because leaving was the oldest, most practiced defense I owned, the thing I did instead of risking being left first, I said, I don't know, because you won't let me see the whole thing. Pain crossed her face and vanished behind the wall she was so good at building. What would you have me do? Tell me when something can hurt me, before it does, so I can choose, instead of finding out from a trade publication. So you can leave before it does, she said, and the accuracy of it made cruelty suddenly, terribly available to me. At least then I'd be leaving for my own reasons, I said, and walked out before I could see what that did to her face. Part 5. The gate absence, I learned, is not empty. It has weight and a schedule and excellent timing. Camila did not call. Neither did I. I finished the book of hours in the last 2 weeks of my contract, working late under the reading room lights, coaxing 400 years of honest use back into a stable, unashamed present. When the binding finally held, I sat alone with it for a long time, thinking about the difference between erasing damage and simply refusing to let it get worse. My contract ended on a Friday. I packed with the particular, deliberate cruelty of someone trying not to feel anything. wrapping the coffee mug Camila had left at my apartment in a sweater, like I was protecting evidence instead of grief. My flight to Chicago, where an old friend had a position waiting at the Newberry Library, left Monday morning. At Miami International, the gate screen read Chicago in clean white letters, while everyone around me behaved as though departure were merely logistical. Boarding began. I thought about her in the rain, saying it was enough to tell the truth about. I thought about her hand finding mine over water glasses under a table of knives disguised as cutlery. I thought about the office, and the terrible accuracy of her question, "So you can leave before it hurts," and understood, finally, standing in a boarding line with my passport already out, that she had been right about me in the exact way I'd accused her of being wrong about herself. She absorbed consequences to control them. I disappeared to control them. We had recognized each other at that wedding, because damage knows its own techniques. I stepped out of the line. I reclaimed my suitcase from a stunned gate agent and crossed the Dolphin Expressway in Monday traffic toward a building in the Design District, where Deb had texted me 3 days earlier, unprompted, under the heading, "In case you're an idiot about this." The Duarte Foundation was hosting the opening of a new maritime archive wing. Camila would be representing the family in front of the same investors, cousins, and reporters who had turned her declaration into a stock price footnote. I changed in a gallery restroom into the same black dress I'd worn the night of the reading room, deliberately underdressed among a room of cocktail attire. I found her before she found me, across a gallery of donated shipping charts and half-restored maritime maps, in a white suit, looking tired enough to make something in my chest twist. She saw me. Her face didn't change. Her whole body did. A stillness moved through her so completely that the conversation around her faltered mid-sentence. I crossed the room. Recognition rippled outward from me like a stone dropped in still water. I walked past Rafael Duarte without looking at him. Camila waited, and up close she looked exhausted, composed, and entirely undefended in a way I had never once seen at any table with knives on it. "Noor," she said, "I thought you had a flight. I missed it. I can arrange another." "Of course you can." A flicker of pain crossed her face. "Why are you here?" I took her hand in front of a room full of people who would translate this into either scandal or strategy by morning, and I found I did not care which. "I'm choosing this," I said. "Not because you claimed me at that wedding, because I'm claiming you back." The gallery went quiet enough to hear the air conditioning. Camila's composure broke, not dramatically, just a parting of her mouth, a shine at her eyes, the woman who could reorganize a boardroom with a glance suddenly, without a single prepared response. What surfaced underneath the control was terrifying, and bright, and entirely real. "You know what this costs," she said, low. "I know what leaving cost me. That number's higher. My father can survive disappointment. Mine's had practice." A laugh escaped her, half breath, half disbelief. "I can't promise this will be easy. I'd trust you less if you did." I held her gaze. "But you tell me things now. Even the parts that are inconvenient. Even the parts you'd rather handle alone." "I'll try. That's more honest than a promise. I'll take it." Behind her, Rafael Duarte watched, and somewhere a camera began, discreetly, to click. The room would turn us into a headline by morning: succession, scandal, strategy, whatever sold, let it. Interpretation comes after the choosing. Camila lifted my hand and pressed her mouth to my knuckles. Formal enough for the witnesses, intimate enough to belong only to us. Then we left together. Outside, Miami carried on without ceremony. Traffic lights changing, a bus exhaling at the corner, someone's dog barking at a delivery scooter. Camila's hand stayed in mine. Nothing about the future had become simple. Her family remained exactly as complicated as it had been an hour ago. My career remained entirely my own, uncertain, unfunded by anyone's trust but mine. Chicago and Miami both still existed, waiting for one of us to choose them. At the corner, she looked at me, something almost shy in it. "Do I belong to you now?" she asked. "No," I said. "But you can walk beside me." Her smile broke open like sunlight through a window that had been painted shut for years. The signal changed. We stepped into the street together, looking straight at the difficult thing ahead of us, and walked toward it anyway.